and would ask DHS to convene the stakeholder work group. And so there are, I know everyone has a handout. If you would like an electronic copy, please let us know and we can send that to you too. Just a couple of things before I talk about the recommendations is, the history, I think, of MI&D commitment is also important for us to look at. And one of the things that even I wasn't aware of, and I was looking at this report back before we, had the idea of the task force here, was that prior to the 1990s, not all the MI&D commitments actually went to quote unquote Minnesota Security Hospital. That really stems from the law, folding the sex offender commitment into the MI&D commitment. This was back in, early 1990s, when the sex offender commitment, like I said, were folded into the MI&D commitment process. So that's one. And then the second is that prior to 1997, this is on page 8, in case people are following. Prior to 1997, only proposed patients were acquitted of a crime against the person pursuant to a verdict of NGRI, had the burden of going forward, and the presentation of the evidence shifted to them. So the burden was on them. But now all proposed patients are subject to this provision. So I think this is also another, kind of pertinent thing for us to consider as we're looking at statutory recommendations. And then the report recommendations, as you can see, there's quite a few of them. And, Sue after Holden was part of this. I think there were a number of people. Robin Lodi was also part of the stakeholder group. There were a number of recommendations that are actually being played out right now. So, amending the statute, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I think we're doing right now. Amending the statute to require that each MI&D person have a review by the SRB every 3 years. At least once every 3 years, that is. Before 2013, that was not a requirement. So we've made a lot of those changes, improvements, I would say. The 4th one was to allow the SRB to have the additional responsibility of reviewing the barriers and obstacles to a patient progressing in treatment, and then also the SRB to submit an annual report to DHS, which includes trends and barriers or obstacles that have come before them for review. And then the second to last was also directing the DHS to change policy to allow the commissioner to reject an unfavorable recommendation from the SRB. Those are the things that have been done. So again, just for folks to be aware that this report is out there, recommendations, we can even look at them to see if we need to modify some of that or even mirror some of that. Any questions that come to mind for folks or anything that you want to talk about? So anything that you would want to say about this report?
It was actually not me that did the bill, some of these recommendations, but they also were not agreed to. So there were recommendations that came up, but not everyone on the task force agreed to them. Just a little different than some things too. So, but it's always been a harder issue than the regular kind of law.
Stu, that second one to the last, how often has that, if ever, happened?
I think actually the commissioner rejected a favorable recommendation and an unfavorable.
Okay.
I think that's what's happened more.
Okay. I just wondered.
I was looking to see what people thought before, as we all can use with this task force.
So it's the idea that we all review this in some detail and come back to the next meeting with any questions. It's 20 pages, so.
More, I think just looking at the recommendations and as each of the groups are kind of developing, drawing together the bill language to make the suggested changes into smaller groups, just to be aware that these were some issues that were brought up over 10 years ago.
So what is the directive before the next meeting then? What is our goal?
For people to write up drafts and their suggested recommendations,
Changes to the statute.
changes to the statute.
So we're each writing our own sections, not writing them together.
Well, we come back together, but yeah, having 20 people write it together is, so,
Right.
yeah, so
There's a group that's
kind of be running it, correct?
where all the work groups are supposed to kind of try to get their stuff together and send it.
We're writing our section, so
Yeah.
we're gonna go ahead and draft changes, based on our discussion, and then that will all come back together for all of us to review.
And do we get those recommendations ahead of time? Because we have, some of us haven't been part of that group at all from day one, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, at least the way that I'm used to doing this is that, you have the smaller group kind of put together language, you come back to the big group, kind of go through them, make more changes, come back until there's recommendations. Because, even broad recommendations like this, it's not helpful unless you're really showing like, how are you gonna change the statute? Because the devil's always in the details. So, yeah.
The reason I'm asking all these questions is because I'm not sure, at least in the groups I've worked on, that there is as many statutory changes as much as funding recommendations.
And that's fine, but there still has to be like appropriations or what, how are you gonna get statute or changing to do something, yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm afraid it'll just sit here as a report instead of actually having language that, either the department or someone else can bring forward.
Okay, so for next meeting, May, we are going to do a virtual meeting with the work groups. And then we'll come together as a larger task force meeting in June. I can't remember where we,
The difference.
yeah, I think we have the date, but I don't.
June
know.
16th.
June 16th, yeah, so that is when the larger MI&D, this group will meet again, but in May, we'll meet just with the work groups. So that we can continue with our work and then get things into writing and so on, so.
Same work groups like that met
Yeah,
today.
today, yes.
Are we supposed to set up our own meetings, or are you saying we're starting and then breaking out in virtual
No,
rooms?
no, we'll just do your
Your virtual.
objectives. Yes, your virtual. If you would like assistance from Carrie, please let her know, and she can set those meetings up.
So we don't have the May 19th meeting as a group, or so
We
could we
won't
do
have
our
it.
virtual then?
Yes. So we will do a virtual just with the work groups. So it will be a work group meeting, not a larger.
But on May 19th, so we don't have to set up a separate meeting
No,
for that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Right, we just would need different,
Yeah,
Teams links.
okay.
Should we and can we make an effort to, have something written up as far as our statutory changes and recommendations, maybe a week before?
June.
Which would give both teams time to review. A week before our June meeting, a week before our June
Yes.
meeting?
Yeah, or as soon as you have something, that your small group has kind of said, okay, we're good with this language,
Yeah.
then bring it to the larger group, yeah.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah, at least-
that would be helpful because it is kind of weird that we don't know what the other groups are talking.
Our work group is kind of relying on some of the stuff from work group 5 and 6. As far as recommending like proposed funding. So is it okay, so you think it's okay if 5 and 6 and 7 and 9 meet together? Because we're getting some data from people too. They wanted to know, have more specifics about how many people were turned voluntary, how many end up being revocations, and can't remember some of the other ones, but I think my group has captured all of the stuff that we are looking for. So is that all right if we meet together?
Whatever makes sense for the work groups,
And that's what I mean, because I know it's changing a little bit of the who's involved, but does that sound okay? Because some of us are in both work groups.
Yes.
I think a lot of overlaps.
Yeah, so to meet together so that we can kind of finish up and
I
not
think
implicating, but or if we are at least adding more emphasis on it, because it applies to both the comings and the goings.
that's why I think those original 7 and 8ers, like Ellen and I detected, because we're like, we can't talk about statutory changes until we talk about resources, so.
Okay, so yeah,
So 5 and 6.
5, 6, 7,
And
9,
9.
yes.
Thanks for keeping that all straight.
Yeah.
Yes, you're amazing.
Just one other question for scheduling. So I have the May 19th currently on everyone's calendars.
Mhm.
Do you want me to send 2 separate invites for that same time and that time frame? the date and timeframe?
Yeah, because it's already blocked.
Already blocked in, yeah, yep.
Let's just use
Okay.
that time, yeah.
Okay, I'll send that out later today then to everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, anything else that we want to talk about, logistics wise?
I would just love to think about, what it'll look like June through August. Like, so we get some of that information just a week maybe before our June meeting. So June will be just hearing from each other's groups and like weighing in on some of the proposals. And then August is right around the corner. So I'm
Yes,
just
I know.
curious, what do we do if there's not consensus? What does the drafting group look like? What kind of time commitment will that be? Good questions. Just to help me map it out.
Well, at least with past groups that I've been on, sometimes the drafting, it comes down to there's these various recommendations that we didn't agree on, and then here's the things that we did agree on, kind of depending on where we end up in the discussion, which is really hard to predict. I don't know if there's gonna be someone at DCT who's gonna be the kind of editor, which is what we did with the priority admissions
Yeah.
task force. So someone went through and edited it, but there were like 4 of us who kind of tried to write the different sections but then have it kind of chill together. I having someone edit it.
I don't know what editing means. Are we talking about just looking for typos or are we talking about?
Oh, and making sure the sentence that it reads kind of the same way. It's not, one person's, different voices, but yeah, doing that kind of thing. It's not changing the recommendations.
And everyone will have reports or drafts after every iteration, if that is what people would like here.
It's that worked pretty well, actually, yeah. I mean, people weren't writing it from necessarily their own perspective. They were trying to capture what the committee had said.
And I think that's just something I want to ensure, because I don't think we've had consensus throughout the whole process, and I don't want it to read like there's consensus.
No, I would never do that. I mean,
I'm not saying you would do it
No.
intentionally, but
no, but that's why the final report has to be approved by this group, and that's what we did with priority admissions too. Everyone at the table had to agree to what was written in the final report.
I think that gets to Cassie's question about making sure we have the time for that. I get a little nervous about August and being like, okay, we got this at 11 PM and now we're gonna vote and we need to make. So, and I see we have July 21st booked. That's probably the last meeting we have booked. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So we might need a couple more in there as we go through this.
Yes, and I think we might have to meet a little more frequently at that time if we need.
Well, and the legislature's not in session in the fall unless they do a special session to deal with Medicaid cuts, right? But so, the number of times DHS has missed a deadline for submitting a report is too numerous to even mention. Nothing happens. I mean, sorry, but nothing happens. It's not like an X
We won't get fined.
or anything like that. So if we're not done in September, we just keep working until we're done with the report and people can sign off on it. I mean, there's nothing that says, how they pick September is, God knows, it's different things. And then there's some language that someone actually has in one of the omnibus bills to delay this until 2026.
I think our report's actually due August 1st.
Yeah, August 1st.
Yeah.
So,
I think my other question kind of related to that is, I'm curious, like, who does make up the final drafting group? Because I think I've heard different kinds of people at different times, and the last time it was a rather large group, and like how you just mentioned, like 4 people or like 5 people, I feel like that makes sense in my brain, but I'm curious who all is who will be on that drafting committee so that we can also do planning.
I don't think we have.
We haven't talked
decided
about
that.
it yet.
So it's kind of, I mean, with the priority admissions task force and even that one, it was people who volunteered and knowing that they were gonna have to not just review something, but actually write it. It took a lot of time. So it has to be someone who's willing to put that time in. And we each took a section and then came back together, which also helped.
So maybe during our June meeting, should we, talk about who's gonna be the drafting committee? Sure. And then, like have different sections planned out and
And I think in our May groups, we can talk and say, hey, the next thing is gonna be who's gonna be drafting, so and
Right.
what.
Right. Kind of a rep from the group.
Yeah,
And I thought I had sent out an outline like quite a few months ago, which I can find you, so thank you.
yeah.
Just about the process.
About what the final report would look like in terms of an outline of different sections.
I don't
Yeah,
know that.
I got that.
Okay. I will find it and send it. to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be,
Million emails probably.
Well, I think the next meeting, the next two meetings, if there's disagreement, I think that's gonna come up. You know, I mean, if there's, that's when we're gonna. Some things will, people will agree on some things, and everybody will agree on other things, and that'll start teasing down.
Yes.
What the recommendations are gonna be and how the proposed changes to the statute go. And I have not done this like Sue has, so.
Well, and even in our meeting this morning, we kind of titrated down what we could agree on, and then we talked about things we still had questions on, we could kind of bring forward this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we have recommendations, but we also have further thought kind of things.
Yeah, and as we were talking about, you know, possible proposed changes and ideas, it just, the statutes are so wonderfully circular, you know, it doesn't, it's not just this statute, it's also the competency statute, it's also the statutes, and so if we're gonna look at those things. I know it's just the MI&D statute, however, you know, you don't make it linear or consistent across the basis of any of those things.
And again, some things aren't necessarily gonna be statutory changes. I mean, even going back to the prior admissions, it's like, you know, we need to fund locked earth facilities. And so there were some things that were just recommendations, without, because the statutory language wasn't necessarily gonna be controversial, you know,
Okay.
so,
Yeah.
but where it is, because the devil's in the details, then I think it would be best to come up with something.
Anything else before we adjourn? I think we have our work cut out for us until June.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you all.
thank you.